If you've been online at all these last few months, you've probably come across an advertisement for long legs, or maybe even a review. And it'll say something like, long legs will take a piece of glass and cut your eyeballs open and ruin your day. And it seems like I'm gonna fucking die if I see this movie. It had me thinking, though, about horror movies that are genuinely fucked up and scary. I don't mean like, mind-fucky horror movies like Midsommar or anything like that. I say Midsommar, but then like Hereditary is pretty terrifying. That's not on the list, but like ruin your day, nightmare fuel type shit. Everyone has different tolerance when it comes to horror. I mean, my sister thinks Parasite is a horror movie, and she like can't watch. She thought Uncut Gems was a horror movie. Like, she and I do not, we are not on the same wavelength when it comes to horror, but that's fine. The point is, I'm gonna make my own little list here to kind of tell you guys the kind of stuff that really gets to me. Let's do the damn thing. I want to start with the first horror movie that ever messed me up, and it is The Ring, 2002, the American remake starring Naomi Watts. I don't think I've actually sat down and watched this movie front to back. I did see the original Japanese film a few years ago, loved it, also thought it was terrifying. But my experience with The Ring 2002 is I like walked by the family room when I was just a little kid, and my parents were watching it, and they don't even watch horror movies. I don't know why they were watching this movie, but it was on, and I sat there and I saw the scene, like the iconic scene of the woman crawling out of the TV, I also happened to see like a bathtub scene. I don't entirely remember it. And it was really disturbing. And seriously, it was the most scared I'd ever been at anything in my life up until then. It really, truly scarred me. I don't think a movie has affected me like that since. I mean, nowadays I can take most things, show me anything and I'll be able to stomach it. But this was a genuinely very terrifying movie as a kid. I'm actually super curious to revisit it now that I'm talking about it, but just had to get that out there. A Rink. Let's bring up a recent one. This is actually probably the most recent film on this list. I did not love Rink when I first saw it. Only gave it like a 3-star. In my review, I talked a little too much about the style and the minimalist approach and the hype surrounding it. I think that kind of watered it down for me a bit. But looking back at it, I think this is one of the most respectable and successful attempts at genuinely fucking up people's day that I've seen in a long time. It really worked on me. It does have jump scares, don't get me wrong. There are definitely jump scares in this thing, but they never feel cheap. They're incredibly well-placed, well-timed, genuinely horrifying. The ending too. The last shot is like the perfect level of like obscurity. I'm like, that is exactly how you do that. That final shot is exactly what I find incredibly disturbing. The more I think about the film as the kind of thing that's from the perspective of a child, the creepier it gets, the more I respect it. I think I was a little hard on this when I first saw it. That's a film that I really want to revisit, but yeah, this one was pretty scary. Oni Baba from 1964, directed by Kaneto Shindo. I'm sure some of you have heard about this. Willem Dafoe is always hyping this movie up, and I think that's amazing. I think you can just tell by the poster to this thing that it's pretty disturbing. The film, I would say, has a lot of dramatic elements. I wouldn't say it's the most straightforward horror, but the parts of it that are meant to be scary are very terrifying. The mask itself is a very scary design, especially the way they light it in the film. It's a very haunting image. I think it's the fact that the film is very sad that makes its scares just that much more threatening. I feel like that when there is an emotional weight to scares, they make a much stronger impression on you, and Oni Baba is a great example of that. I don't think I'm alone in saying that like older movies with like a grainier, rough around the edges look to them, that part of them that they couldn't help actually adds to the experience. 1964 is not that old, but you know what I mean. It makes the images just a lot more horrifying, in my opinion. I don't think if they made this today, it would have at all the same effect unless they tried to emulate the look of it. And while I'm on that note, I want to talk about A Page of Madness. This is a silent film from 1926 out of Japan that is about an insane asylum. I would call it experimental, to be honest, and there are blips in here that I think, because of the fact that it's a silent film and it's just horrifying images with no sound, it's terrifying. Like, they just burn themselves into your brain. I do not recommend watching this one right before bed. I think I remember actually having nightmares after this. I'll say it. The Witch. Not a film that I loved the first time I saw it. I did not really get it. But one that the more I've rewatched it, I've come to appreciate more and more. And I think by now I'm actually like thinking about it in retrospect. It's a really incredible movie. But even the first time I saw it, when I didn't love the film altogether, I thought the goat was insane. The goat really freaked me out. I think it's because I grew up with a goat. I grew up on a farm and we had a black billy goat that looked a lot like this. And it was just, I remember it chasing me. And this just taps into some corner of my brain that is so traumatized from being chased by a goat that, like, when I see that shot of the goat, like, jumping and running towards the camera, it's just, I'm laughing out of discomfort. I don't think this is the scariest movie in the world. This might be one of those where it's like people will screenshot this out of context and be like, look at this fucking baby. But this is something about the goat really freaks me out. I'm going to be honest. I'm going to say Funny Games. I've been sitting here for like 3 minutes, not talking, just staring at this screen, deciding if I'm going to say something. But I will say Funny Games. I think when watching it, it's not like a, ooh, kind of reaction. You know, you're not like traditionally scared. But it's really permanently fucked up the way I think about, like being in a home in the middle of nowhere. I think about this movie often. I think on a rewatch, I really didn't like the fourth wall stuff. I don't like how meta it gets, but that is besides the point. We're talking about disturbing movies, and this is a disturbing movie. Lays its foot down on the neck and does not lift up. Damn, that's a crazy way of describing it. That's kind of how it feels to watch this movie. You're just being like suffocated for ever. It's very claustrophobic. Kind of frustrating watch. You're just like, it really feels like a nightmare. It goes places that you thought it shouldn't go at all. And then once it goes there, you're kind of like, well, fuck, anything can happen now. The line seems so far removed that it's like, this movie will go anywhere. And that was the truly devastating realization you have like halfway through watching this, is like, oh my God, don't do this. And yeah, I think it has really affected me, and I think about it pretty often, even if it is a bit of a flawed film. Next up is Old. I'm kidding. Can you imagine? While we're at it, I'll throw in Angst, directed by Gerald Cargill. This is a film I watched because I think Gaspar Noé must have recommended it at some point, and it is like, yeah, it's like a really horrifying Gaspar Noé film. The camera is moving all the way around. It's like supposed to be from the perspective of a killer who is released from prison and kills a woman. And it really is just like a nauseating, headache-inducing movie that leaves a horrible, sour taste in your mouth. It's a lot like Funny Games in that it's like once it presses down, it does not let up until it's over. So you're kind of just like dreading where it goes because you know it is not afraid to go to certain places. This is a really genuinely scary movie in kind of a different way, more of like a in one ear out the other kind of way. I don't think it's lasted with me, but the experience of watching it, being presently in the film, is truly miserable. But it's really well made. And you know what? I'll finish off with one more. We'll do Texas Chainsaw Massacre. That's a classic. Amazing. It's one of my favorite horror movies of all time. I love its glacial pace. I think that has a tremendous effect on just how horrifying it is. And the design of Leatherface and his crew is just so disturbing. It is beyond disturbing. It's so real that it's hard to believe that it's a movie, that these are actors. Even though it's a classic, even though I've seen it multiple times now, it still continues to scare me and to put me on edge. It's one of the best horror movies ever made, in my opinion. And that's my list of genuinely terrifying movies. I know so many of you are going to be like, this is a weak list. And I know there are tons of horror movies that I haven't seen that probably deserve to be on this list. We'll see if Longlegs makes the cut in a few days. That's what we got for now. Thanks for watching. What are your scariest movies? And boo!